session is with an expert who's joining us from UK, and the session is with Mr. Mike Bradley, who's a group CSO of ScaleUpArena, and he is going to enlighten us about optimizing global growth post pandemic. So let's welcome Mike into the show. Hello, Mike. How are you doing?
Hi, Chandra. Yes, I'm very good. Thank you. And yourself?
Doing good, and you're looking good as usual. And you
Well,
are
I
now
try my best.
absolutely you're now live, and a lot of people are watching. So, viewers, in case you have a question about what we are discussing, you can also join live, and your camera and your voice will come live on our show, and we can address you. We can address you. You can have any question. You can join the discussion with Mike also. So, Mike, today's discussion is about the optimizing the growth post pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
When you say growth post pandemic, obviously there are some changes which has happened to the business. There are permanent changes which has happened. So what is so specific that we will have to change as business people to stay relevant, Mike?
Sure. Well, I think one of the most important changes, of course, is lack of travel. We historically have travelled a lot. I think potentially unnecessarily, and that's obviously for small organisations has incurred incredible amount of costs. However, with the pandemic, we've all had to reevaluate how we do our business, how we trade, where we trade, and so I think one of the biggest changes is now that we have to embrace this new world of working virtually more often, less face to face, but still building those relationships that we would traditionally have done in a face to face way, but build those initially virtually, and then hopefully at points in the future we are able to meet face to face and develop those. And I think that's so. I think the virtual side is one of the changes. I think the second one is it's really changing the approach that we have in terms of um, the way we work. Where traditionally people would want to open a subsidiary maybe in an international country and run that themselves, but I think the new model lends itself better to working in conjunction with local organisations. So having more of a localized base, because that way local people can work with local organizations, but maybe in conjunction with international suppliers.
Mike, before you joined our show today, I was informing viewers about a new agreement pioneered by China among the ASEAN countries, and there are 15 other signatories to this agreement called RCEP, and their targets are huge. I mean, if you look at, they are at, almost like $5.2 trillion increase by having this agreement. It's a huge sum of money they are sitting on, and by 20,
Mm,
each of these member countries will increase their revenue, import and export revenue by 502 billion on an average. So it's a huge money that these countries are talking about, and obviously Chinese is driving this because they are the main country. Uh, Apart
hmm
from these 15 countries, the total population which covers this agreement is 2.2 billion people of Earth. So obviously, China is the main entity here, which is having a population of then 1.5 billion. So when we are
Sure.
talking about post-pandemic, and there are agreements coming up like this to improve economic situation post-pandemic, what is that these entities are doing? I mean, for example, in India also we are doing a lot as a government, but it is not as big as what these guys are doing, the RCEP guys are doing, the ASEAN countries are doing. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling.
Hmm.
What we should
Yep.
do as countries, as UK, as India, as US, what is that we should do to counter this economic opportunity?
Well, I think to some extent we've already had across a lot of the what you would call the Commonwealth nations, 53 nations. We've had friendly trading agreements between sovereign states. So I think that is a very positive counter to that, is that we've already got historical links, we've already got trading relationships. What we have to do is ensure we optimize those. And of course, you know, post us leaving the European Union, the UK, I think that has opened up the ability to trade more openly across the English speaking world, if you like, which represents actually 2.2 billion people across the planet. So, what obviously China's a big, um, obviously a big number, and India is a comparative population. But India, as you well know, India and the UK have got good historical links, trading links. I can only see that growing. Every day at the moment, we're hearing about other trade agreements, and we're becoming part of other international arrangements. We are trying to streamline and optimize our growth between us across the globe. So I think on a national level, I think things are happening. Of course, on the ground, what has to happen is the individual companies have to be able to set up and trade easily. And I think as I came in, there was somebody talking about how there's the ability to transfer currency, etc. These sort of things have to be streamlined. These are areas that we can't rely on the traditional historical models. We have to utilize the we have to utilize new mechanisms for trading between ourselves, and ultimately, whilst the governments can oil the wheels of international trade, it's actually going to be the companies that have to implement it. And I think there we have to ensure that we distinguish between multinationals and also the SMEs, because the way that multinationals trade is completely different to the way SMEs trade. Because multinationals obviously have a large presence, massive marketing budgets, people on the ground, subsidiaries, etc. So that's a very different situation for most SMEs, which is why, as I said, on the, the the best way I believe for SMEs to work within this framework is obviously to have profile and presence within the local government, within the local national governments, so that the wheels can be oiled for SMEs to trade internationally, not just the multinationals. Secondly, I think it means that we have to ensure that these um, that we optimize the use of virtual technology like we are today. As you well know, you're in India and I'm in the UK. We're using virtual communication to communicate across the world in a cost-effective and efficient manner, time-wise and resource-wise. But also that SMEs have to recognise that in order to make these things work, because of the logistical differences between our countries and the taxation systems and the way that companies are set up, run, uh, the model moving forward has to be one which, for particularly in the SME market, to say actually let's work through local resellers, local agents, local partnerships, because we're not going to be traveling the world so much, I don't believe. But what we are going to be doing is we're going to be able to interact with each other, promote the supply of each other's programs and goods, be that services or product. and we can do that efficiently and effectively, particularly post-pandemic, which we couldn't before. So I think there's, those three components to me are interesting, exciting, and those are the ways that we counter these mega agreements. Of course, the other thing we have in our favour is that we have open societies, our internet access is easier. In theory, our networks are open, maybe not as punchy bandwidth as we would like, but we can actually interact with each other globally very easily, which is a major benefit for those of us across the English-speaking world. And of course, the language helps. Nothing to do with the UK. I think it's more to do with the States, that everybody sort of speaks a pseudo English. But that also helps us. We've got language in our favour. We've got open networks and communication in our favour. We've got virtual communication in our favour, and we've got governments that recognise the potential of trading together internationally.
Yeah, I think I fully second you on this one. And you actually raised a very important point about the SMEs. And when you say SMEs, it's basically people who are below 1,000 employees, or about, if you look at India, then the classification is totally different. It is up to 1,000 to 2,000 in SMEs. So if you look at the global standard, the SME of India will be much larger company. But in India, they are SMEs, they are small, medium enterprises. So when it comes to SME, I think there is always a shortage of funds, shortage of markets, uh, shortage of skilled labor, attract skilled labor, etc. These are the common problems across the world, not only in India but everywhere else. So in the paradigm, because we are discussing in this session about what do we do post pandemic in the changing paradigm, how the SMEs collaborate with each other, and what is the role government has to play to help specifically the SME segment.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we have to ensure that the government does recognise the SME segment, and that isn't always a given. Because the biggest numbers, the biggest employers are the multinationals, so they always seem to get the most attention. But the future of most global economies is the small to medium enterprises, and be they micro businesses right the way through to the larger SMEs. So I think it's very important that there are local organisations that are representing SMEs, and I suppose there's like the chambers of commerce, but there's also needs to be, I believe, sector-based groups that are representing the interests of the sectors to grow in particular markets, be pharmaceutical, be, I don't know, meditech, be cybersecurity, etc. These different groups need to have interaction and interface and connection into government. I believe that the government then needs to recognise that the potential for growth, and we all know about things like scale-ups, which are the rapid growth companies that are, particularly in the UK, they are the ones that are doing the bulk of the revenue in the SME sector. They are the biggest employers, the recruiters, but below the scale-ups, which are traditionally, I think it's 3 years of 20% year-on-year growth, with an employee count of 10 or 20 at the start of the process. But beneath that are the group of companies that I would call the emerge ups. These are the ones that are expanding, they've got a proven model, they've got maybe a product that is already selling in the local market. And so what we have to do is make it easier for those organizations to trade internationally. And of course, that's what the whole emphasis of ScaleUpArena is all about, is to provide an environment which enables those sort of companies, the emerge ups, the growing SMEs, to access funding, be it debt or equity based, access maybe acquisitions. We've got an M&A boutique as part of our ScaleUpArena, which means that we can help companies to source acquisitions in international markets, quite an effective way to grow. Also, accessing partners, accessing resellers. As you know, my background itself is developing partnerships on an international level. That's something which I think SMEs have to take on board and need support with. It's not a short-term win in most cases. It's a medium to long-term um, route to success. There's also joint venturing and partnering with other strategic brands into countries where maybe the local new country has a large presence in the right sector or in the right size of organizations. So you strike up a relationship to get your product out through to them. And then we've got the ability to have people showcasing their solutions and services through a marketplace, which means that anybody on the internet, outside of China, of course, because they can't see it, but outside of China, anybody can see these solutions and find out information and contact people. Another big area, I think, if you're trying to develop international markets and partners, is education. And it's not just about developing the right skills. This is about developing the market, because particularly if you're coming to market, and we're all living in a dynamic product environment, but if you're coming to market with a new style product, the market may not even know that they have a need for your product until you educate them about it. So there's an education piece. So that's the ability to run maybe a webinar or briefing sessions, invite people along on an international basis virtually to find out about these new solutions. That could be your solution going into a market that has a unique proposition, but then doing this in an efficient way using, webinars and briefings to let people know this product is out here and this is why you need to be taking it into your local market and how you can optimize the opportunity. And then finally, there are a whole, plethora of experts who've been in the market, got specialist skills, be it tax, be it GDPR, be it cybersecurity, be it manufacturing automation, who are readily available on a subcontracted basis to help organizations in the SME space who maybe can't afford these people on a full-time basis, but could actually utilize their skills on a project basis or a retained basis on a regular basis to enable them to get access to affordable skills to help them optimize the opportunities on an international level. So I think these components are absolutely vital for growth for SMEs. Be interesting to hear what some of the audience think about these things. Obviously, what we run all these different areas that can support growing companies. I actually run an international development course myself that I put together for one of the UK government programs a few years ago. Also, I run at something I call the Executive Therapist Chair, which is a way of brainstorming with the CEOs or boards of directors the strategic approach for growth, which obviously can include the international piece. So, there's lots of things we can do. And I know that you've got a background in international development as well, Chandra. So, hopefully you agree with what I say. And if you don't, I'm sure you do.
Yes, Mike, I fully agree with you. I think these are the things that individually people will need to do. They need to get their act together. They need to ensure that we are behaving in a cooperative manner, not in any other way. But I think the framework is very important, because currently, for example, you mentioned about the definition which is prevalent in the UK or probably few Commonwealth countries, but this is not standard, So in order to have a standard practice across the world in SME or large enterprises, small enterprises, so that they start looking at different taxation, different kind of framework, that is missing from our environment. Do you think it's a problem, and the government of the world should get their act together first and make a standard practice across the world, standardization of practice?
Uh,
Don't.
um, yes and no. I think different countries have different demographics. I mean, if you compare India with 1.x billion people with the UK, we've got, I think it's 66 million people. So our demographics are different. And I think that's why our definition of SME is different, because, 1,000 people in India is a drop in the ocean. 1,000 people here, and you're a fairly substantial organization. So I don't think the definition matters. I think the characteristics of the organization matter. So, if and I think this is down to whether it's a multinational, an MNC, whether it's a scale up, whether it's an emerge up, whether it's a micro company. These things are important, and having uh, localized mechanisms for enabling those people to access the services they need is important. So, for example, ScaleUpArena across the globe, we don't mind whether somebody is an SME in India with 750 people, or they're an SME in the UK with 50 people, because they still need access to funding, partnering, M&A, showcasing internationally, education, and service providers. So there's still the same requirement for the actual organizations, but the size might be slightly different. What I think is important is the ability to trade and share different currencies. The taxation system needs to be easier for SMEs, because it's complicated enough as it is. And so I think the differences in the taxation systems around the globe make it tricky for SMEs, particularly the smaller ones, which is why I believe if you're a smaller SME, the solution isn't always open a subsidiary. The solution is quite often work in conjunction with a local partner, because they have the presence already. And then it's a case of providing your solution out through that particular existing resource where they have existing clients, etc. So I think it's very, very important to have the rationale and the premise right for what you're doing, why you're doing it, very clearly establish your credibility and experience. And this would probably be, you know, this is what we've done at home, this is what's worked well, this is how we recommend you work in your local country. Have your proposition correct, your solution, and then identify clearly what the next actions are. So if you're working in conjunction with a existing supplier in a new country, um, work clearly to identify who are the low hanging fruit targets within their customer base that could take your solution, and the expertise that's important. So I think that whole defining the process and program is very important, and then getting buy-in at both ends to have a plan of attack, if you like.
Yes, Mike, let's shift our gear, and let's remain focused on the post pandemic world. I think we have discussed the regulations and the taxation. I think let's wait and watch what the government do and how they actually get their act together. Um,
Mm.
However, as individuals, what is the business which is going to thrive in next 10 years? Because a lot of people are saying that the hospitality is dead, airlines is dead, tours and travel tourism is dead, hotels are dead, leisure business is dead. So what is that people should be doing in the SME space in next 10 years?
Well, I think very much this has to be based on local markets, which is why again I think it's the emerging SMEs in the different markets are the ones who will identify what they need to be doing. What needs to happen in India may not need to be the same thing as happening in the UK or the US or Singapore. But what I do think is going to happen is we've got to recognise that the trading environments are going to be online. They need to be focused on delivering value. They need to be focused on differentiation. It mustn't be a race to the middle, because if you race to the middle, you can guarantee it's not going to last very long. There's a book out there called Uncommon Sense and Common Nonsense. I've always believed in the 80-20 rule, so I tend to think that the uncommon sense is what 20% of people are pursuing, and it's that is going to differentiate your business, your product, your service in the marketplace, rather than following after the common nonsense, which is of course what most of the multinationals do. They all try and copy each other to share out the pie of market share. Whereas I think what the SMEs have to do is very clearly focus on what is our differentiation? Why do people buy from us? Why will we retain them? Why will we prevent churn? And the only way you do that, I believe, is by focusing properly on the customer requirement, not getting locked into this whole corporate AAA syndrome, as I call it. I know we've discussed this before, but corporate amnesia, forgetting that when an organisation gets so big, they forget that the customer makes up the spreadsheet. So they spend all their time looking at the numbers and how many orders and how many people they're losing every month. But actually, what they need to get back to is talking to the customer, which is the second AAA, of course, corporate asphyxiation. They got so high in the clouds, they got so big in their own local country that they think, we know what we need to do, we keep doing it. But the day you stop listening to customers, the day you stop listening to your employees, is the day that you're going to actually start to have a problem. So I think whatever it is you're doing, whatever market you're in, whatever product you're selling, you have to keep listening to what the customers are saying, what the customers are wanting, and ultimately keeping the customers happy. Because the most expensive thing in a business, in my view, is the loss of a customer. The easiest thing is to retain a customer and keep a customer retained. So the focus has to be on keeping customers happy and retaining them. Otherwise, all you're doing is replacing the customers you lose every year, and that isn't good news. And the other part of that is, unless you're in a very traditional business, you have to keep adapting what you do to address the continually changing market dynamics. That means your product needs to keep improving. Even if you're in manufacturing, you have to be looking to improve your quality of manufacture, your quality of supply, your ease of service, your reduction of overheads, your increase in productivity. Maybe that means putting in more automation, whether that be a service organization with remote process automation, or whether that be a manufacturing company with putting in manufacturing automation on the factory floor. Whatever you do, you have to keep focusing on improvement of product, improvement of service, and reduction of cost, and through despite increased productivity, doing more with less.
I think, Mike, you speak very nicely about what people should be doing. I think your participation is very, very important for our show. We need a lot of information with regard to importance of R&D, importance of ethics, importance of customer relationship, etc. So we will find future sessions with you where you can talk to our viewers in future. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we went live along with you. And we will keep you posted in case there's somebody asking for help or some advices from you. Thank you so much, Mike.
Lovely. Been a pleasure, Chandra. Take care. Talk to you again soon.